Turns out Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will still get paid millions of dollars for doing absolutely nothing.
President Trump also announced a new trade deal with the UK. All that Britain demands in return is that we keep these two.
No!
Yeah, they were very worried about their safety, which I get that aspect of things after 6 episodes. I wanted to attack them.
If you came up with the picture of an annoying, insufferable white woman, it would be Meghan Markle.
If you closed your eyes and pictured the single most humiliating moment for Meghan Markle on live television, chances are it wouldn't even come close to what actually happened the night Colin Jost took the stage on Saturday Night Live. This wasn't just another cheeky late-night jab or some passing meme that would fade by morning. No, this was the moment millions of viewers watched in real time as an entire audience erupted in laughter. Not with Meghan, but at her. And somewhere across the Atlantic, or maybe in their Montecito mansion, Prince Harry was watching too. The man who once walked behind his mother's coffin in front of the world, who had fought for years to shield his wife from even the smallest slight, was now witnessing the biggest one yet. Insiders who've worked with Harry say the second the punchline hit, he was pacing, red-faced, his jaw clenched so tight you could see the tension in his temples. And it wasn't just anger, it was embarrassment, disbelief, and the icy realization that maybe, just maybe, America wasn't going to be the safe haven he'd imagined. Because when the SNL crowd roared, it wasn't just a good joke, it was a cultural verdict. The fairy tale was over. The prince and the actress had officially become a punchline, and no amount of carefully worded press releases would ever make that moment disappear. The joke itself was almost deceptively simple. Colin Jost stood there, grinning that sly grin of his, and told America that President Trump had struck a new trade deal with the UK. And all Britain wanted in return? That America keep these two. Camera didn't need to cut to a graphic. Everyone knew who these two were, the Sussexes, the couple who'd traded a palace for a podcast, who'd sworn they were done with public life and then proceeded to sign every lucrative deal in sight. The reaction was instant and electric. Laughter, applause, crackling sense that a line had been crossed and nobody really cared. That's what made this particular dig so potent. It didn't just poke fun at Meghan's acting career or Harry's royal baggage. It obliterated the idea that they were still relevant in any respectable way. And for Harry, a man whose life has been shaped by public opinion since birth, that was more than just a bad night of television. It was a humiliation he couldn't control. So how do you think Prince Harry reacted behind closed doors? If you know even a little about Harry, you can probably picture it. He has never exactly been the type to shrug off criticism, especially when it targets Meghan. In the past, he's fired off legal threats over tabloid stories, demanded retractions, and publicly condemned the British press for what he called their ruthless campaign of harassment. But this was different. This was America, country they'd gambled everything on, place they believed would finally embrace them, protect them, validate them. To see the nation's most beloved comedy show lampoon them so viciously had to feel like a personal betrayal. One insider who claims to have worked with Harry on a recent project said he has a very specific tell when he's furious. He rubs the bridge of his nose over and over like he's trying to erase the thought from his mind. He paces. He vents. He calls his lawyers, not always because he plans to sue, but because it's the only way he feels he has any power left. And it's not hard to imagine Meghan herself trying to talk him down, telling him this would all blow over, that SNL roasts everyone, even presidents. But for Harry, this was a wound that cut deeper than any political satire, because no matter how hard he tried to outrun it, he was still the prince who gave up everything for love. And now people were laughing at the very thing he'd sacrificed it all to protect. Imagine the frustration, the disbelief, the sinking dread that every late-night host would replay that joke for weeks. This wasn't just a moment. It was a confirmation that their entire brand, privacy, authenticity, purpose, had turned into a spectacle. And if there's one thing Harry has never tolerated, it's the feeling that he's lost control of the narrative. But SNL was only the first domino, because once that clip went viral, every other comedian saw an open season. Suddenly, it felt as though every stage in America was echoing the same brutal question. What exactly are Harry and Meghan contributing? Joe Coy, standing before a sea of Hollywood power players at the Golden Globes, took a swing so direct it made even the seasoned veterans wince. He reminded the audience that while most of them had to produce actual work for their massive paychecks, Harry and Meghan were still collecting millions for doing absolutely nothing. Camera panned to faces trying and failing not to smirk. It was a perfect storm of resentment and ridicule, because deep down, everyone knew there was a kernel of truth. The Sussexes had cashed in their royal notoriety, and it hadn't really delivered the impact they'd promised. Their big Netflix deal was turning into a punchline, and no amount of heartfelt documentaries could change that. The late-night gauntlet didn't stop there. Trevor Noah offered his own twist, imagining Meghan scolding Harry in their kitchen, telling him he needed to get a job. Jimmy Kimmel, never one to pull punches, went further, pointing out the absurdity of fleeing Britain for America to escape racism. He said, almost incredulous, that it must have been really bad if they came here thinking things would be easier. That line landed like a slap, because for years, Harry and Meghan had cultivated the image of principled exiles, standing up to an archaic institution. But in America, where everyone is fair game, that narrative dissolved into something more cynical. A story about two privileged people who couldn't stop complaining. As the jokes escalated, so did the damage. Even their personal branding choices became fair game. When Meghan launched her new lifestyle venture, a venture she positioned as empowering and wholesome, the media pounced on reports she wasn't actually cooking anything. Instead, she was repackaging store-bought meals to look like homegrown creations. For comedians like Jimmy Fallon, this was comedic gold. He gleefully mocked the idea of Meghan making her own pretzel bags by simply taking them from one bag and putting them in another. The studio howled, and somewhere in California, you can bet Harry's blood pressure spiked again. Because every time they tried to pivot to prove their sincerity, it only invited more mockery. If you think late-night hosts were the worst of it, you haven't been paying attention to the savage world of stand-up comedy. Unlike television, stand-up stages don't have network censors to soften the blows. Ricky Gervais, for example, didn't bother with clever metaphors. He went straight for the royal jugular, describing Harry and Meghan as the ultimate entitled aristocrats who expect to be worshipped for existing. It was raw, unfiltered, and exactly what audiences had been whispering for years. John Mulaney delivered an even simpler insult: that Harry was a dumb ginger who couldn't wait out his elderly grandmother. You could almost hear the collective gasp, but the crowd still laughed, because the joke captured what so many were thinking, that for all the high-minded rhetoric, Harry's choices seemed petulant and shallow. Tim Dillon, never known for restraint, took things to another level. He didn't just call Meghan insufferable, he framed her entire public persona as a condescending act, the kind of celebrity who believes the rest of us are animals needing enlightenment. He sneered that she was helping us with jam and honey, as if the world was waiting for her personal approval to live better lives. And the audience howled. Because no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, there's something inherently absurd about a duchess selling lifestyle products while claiming to want privacy. But if there was any moment that crystallized their downfall, it wasn't a stand-up set. It was an animated cartoon. South Park's worldwide privacy tour didn't just parody Harry and Meghan, it dissected them. The show captured every contradiction. The desire to flee the press while courting attention, the insistence on privacy while hawking a memoir, the tone-deaf complaints about security costs. One unforgettable scene showed the couple screaming into megaphones from their private jet, "We want privacy!" over and over, louder and more ridiculous each time. That image, more than any tabloid headline, became the defining symbol of their story. And when you've become a running joke on South Park, there's no coming back without serious reinvention. The most uncomfortable part of this saga, though, wasn't a scripted punchline. It was an unscripted moment. During Harry's interview with Stephen Colbert, Colbert tried to offer a lifeline, a chance for Harry to show a little humility, maybe even some self-awareness. He quoted a line about being a good man rather than debating what makes one. But Harry didn't seem to get it. He tossed off a casual good knowledge comment, completely missing the gravity of the point, and in that instant the illusion cracked. You could see it in his eyes, the strain of trying to hold everything together, the fear that it was already too late. When you stand back and look at all of it, the SNL takedown, the late-night ridicule, the cartoons, the awkward interviews, you start to see why Harry's fury that night wasn't just about Colin Jost's joke. It was about the realization that no matter how carefully you craft your narrative, you can't control how people receive it. And for Harry, a man who spent his life trying to shape public perception, that's the ultimate nightmare. Because this isn't just a story about a royal couple getting roasted. It's a cautionary tale about authenticity, or the lack of it. The The more Harry and Meghan tried to convince everyone they were ordinary, the more obvious it became they were anything but. The more they insisted they wanted privacy, the clearer it was they craved the spotlight. And once the public saw through it, there was no unseeing it. So when people ask whether Harry and Meghan can ever rebuild their brand, the answer isn't just about strategy or PR. It's about trust. Once you lose that, no podcast, no documentary, no carefully curated Instagram post can get it back. You become a character in someone else's story, a punchline in someone else's script, and no amount of fury can change that. But the truly unsettling part of this entire saga is that Harry likely never imagined it would end like this. When he and Meghan first stepped back from royal duties, they didn't just leave a family. They left behind a centuries-old institution built on carefully polished appearances. In the royal bubble, even your mistakes are cloaked in layers of tradition and deference. Side of it, though, you're fair game. And that's the one truth Harry underestimated. In America, the land of relentless commentary, you can't demand respect simply because of your lineage. You have to earn it every single day. And the minute you start acting like you're above it, the public will happily remind you that you're not. You can almost picture the first strategy meetings in Montecito, polished consultants in crisp suits, the branding experts nodding thoughtfully over mood boards and mission statements. Everyone probably thought they had the perfect plan. Position Harry and Meghan as modern, relatable, a couple reimagining public service for the social media age. Problem is, every move they made afterward only underscored the exact opposite. Their Oprah interview, meant to inspire empathy, came off to many as a glossy exercise in self-pity. The Netflix specials, intended to showcase their humanitarian mission, looked suspiciously like a rebranding campaign. Even their charitable efforts were drowned out by the spectacle of million-dollar deals and designer wardrobes. And all of that context is what made the SNL joke land like a meteor. Colin Jost didn't just roast them for fun. He punctured the last fragile hope that the public still saw them as noble underdogs. He confirmed what people were already whispering, that the Sussexes were cashing in, that they had swapped royal duty for Hollywood glamour and expected everyone to applaud them for it. It was the exact moment when the curtain was finally pulled back, and Harry, who spent so much of his life dreading tabloid cruelty, discovered that late-night comedy was an even more ruthless judge. Imagine being him that night, the phone buzzing with alerts, friends texting screenshots, his team frantically drafting statements, weighing whether to respond or stay silent, and Meghan, perhaps trying to remain calm, scrolling through social media as hashtags about the skit started trending. The humiliation wasn't just in the content of the joke, it was in how fast it traveled. Millions of people had already watched it by sunrise. There was no dignified retreat, no royal communications office to absorb the blow. It was just them, alone with the realization that they had lost the one thing they valued most: control. And this loss wasn't temporary, planted a seed of doubt that grew every time another show piled on. Because after SNL, it became clear that this wasn't just an isolated moment of ridicule, it was the new normal. Jimmy Fallon, Trevor Noah, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, every major comedian took their turn. And then came the social media creators, TikTok accounts slicing together every humiliating clip, captioning them with phrases like "modern royalty exposed." Within days, the narrative had metastasized beyond anything a PR team could contain. It wasn't about one joke anymore. It was about the story that Harry and Meghan had become the most unintentionally entertaining couple on the planet. In some ways, that's what made it so tragic. Because behind the performative outrage and the carefully curated Instagram photos, you could still see glimpses of two people who genuinely believed they were doing something noble, who wanted to rewrite what it meant to be royal, who thought telling their story would help people understand them. But somewhere along the way, the sincerity curdled into entitlement. And once the public senses entitlement, they never forget it.